Bone, joint, and muscle injuries, they can happen without warning. That's why UPMC Orthopedic Care provides convenient walk-in access at our injury clinics throughout the region. No appointments are needed, just walk in for expert evaluation and exceptional care by our team of orthopedic specialists. Clinics are located in Carlisle, Lidditz, Harrisburg, and Enola. For directions and hours or to learn more, visit upmc.com/injury clinic.
Welcome to another edition of the PA High School Football Report. I am PennLive's Eric Epler alongside longtime colleague now.
Yeah.
We've been with us a while. This is not like New York. We don't play that where you got to be here 20 years before you're a New Yorker. You are a Central PA mid-stater.
Yeah.
Dan,
I feel like it.
Sostek, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. You know, I've been really down for the count the last few weeks. Like this, I don't know what sickness my brother gave me at our Passover Seder, but whatever it was like, I always tell people I don't get sick often, but when I get sick, it's like a devastating. Yeah, it's like just a right hook to the face. And I was down for about a week. And then the second week I was better, like definitely not infectious or anything, but I was still, my nose was completely clogged and I had the sinus headaches and everything is finally starting to fade. And that is kind of the good thing about being sick. When you get healthy, it does feel so great. It's like the appeal of living in the Northeast, right? It's why I appreciate summer, because you had to deal with the winter. Having clear sinuses feels pretty darn good right now.
Listen, wait till you become an old head like me. You know, what used to take, I always read somewhere, I don't know where I read it, years and years ago. It said if you don't do anything, and like a typical flu-like symptoms, you get clogged up, whatever, you cough for a couple, it takes 11 days to get out of your system, right? When you get old like me, it takes like 33 days. It's triple.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in my 30s now. I'm approaching that.
I was going to say, that's what I was getting at, is you are no spring chicken anymore.
Yeah. I told my mom on my last birthday, I said, no longer eligible to be an MLB prospect or anything. I would now be a freak show story about a 30-year-old who made the majors. So
exactly. Yes.
My dreams are over.
You would be like Bull Durham.
Yeah. But Bull Durham, I remember Chris Coast from the Phillies back in the day.
What are you, 30?
Yeah, 30.
Yeah. If you're 30 and still in AA, it's time to take that job selling cars.
Yeah.
But you're at your buddy's business. You got to get on with it. All right, Dan. So it's a glorious Thursday afternoon out, but we're in here checking out, talking a little high school football in general, too. We finally got some verification on a couple moves. You had a story out, I don't know, within the last 24 hours.
Yeah, yesterday morning.
Yeah, about a significant move.
Yeah.
Why don't you start with yours, and then I'll come in with one of mine.
There's been a lot of talk about it. I mean, I think he's tweeted about it, but, we try to get the official confirmation before, especially with transfer stuff. You kind of have to go through the proper pipelines and everything. And Rick Brown, star linebacker at Harrisburg, who's got 3 Division I offers, has transferred to Bishop McDevitt. I believe he's there now. He's got offers from Syracuse, from Minnesota, from West Virginia. So he's a legitimate player. Led their team in tackles last year as Harrisburg, ran all the way to the state semifinals. I think the interesting thing here is obviously, he's leaving Harrisburg. He's a really good team. But he's joining that Bishop McDevitt linebacker core that even if they didn't have Rick Brown, I would still say that's one of the best linebacking cores in the entire state. It's got to rival some linebacking cores, down in Florida, down in Ohio. Like, it's just, you don't get too often where you get 3 Division I linebackers at at a locally competing school. So it's going to be fun to watch them. Maurice Barnes, Rick Brown. I wonder if also it's going to allow them to not play Nazir Jones-Davis quite as much there, despite how good he was. I imagine he's going to be really ramped up as a running back this coming fall. So gives Jeff Wechter and that group a ton of flexibility. He's a heck of a player. He's one of those guys that is just always around the football.
Yeah, you always wonder too. I mean, I always kid with you and Brian and the guys about, let's just see who shows up.
Yeah.
In August camp at McDevitt, because you just don't know. But obviously Rick Brown's going to be an unbelievable addition to that defense. You mentioned some of the other guys, and you tack on a Kevin Brown up front, and you tack on a couple of guys in the defensive secondary, and yeah, that defense should be pretty darn nasty, with or without Rick Brown.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. Harrisburg lost another guy, too. We had the story up on D'Antae Sheffey, running back, Syracuse recruit, is back at State College, where he started his career. Obviously, he was a big piece of that puzzle, too, for Harrisburg last year, moving to the PIAA 6A semifinals. So, yeah, so that's a nice infusion for State College. And there's a couple more, you mentioned, we hear about these guys, sometimes through Twitter, sometimes through the grapevine, but, it's necessary for us.
There's going to be a lot of moving faces, it sounds like, in the Mid-Penn this fall.
Yeah, it almost feels like we're on the cusp of a little mini portal.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
But obviously there's reasons for both moving on, and there'll be other kids, as you mentioned. But two of obviously the 6A powers in the Mid-Penn.
Like, both those moves are kind of interesting in terms of looking at, and like you said, we still don't even know who's going to be on those teams in the coming fall. But like, the McDevitt team's obviously going to play a different way than they have played the last few years, right? Tom DiMartini, our coworker, had a good story on Sebastian Williams, caught up with him. He's been groomed for a while as, the successor to Stone Saunders. But he's been playing basketball. He's been their best lacrosse player this year, but he's getting ready to take over the mantle there. But I imagine they will not ask quite what they asked of Stone next year. But they've still got weapons. They've got Jonte Quick, who just got his first Division I offer. Gage Ruth, I believe, is back as well. Yep. Liam Fuller's recruitment has blown up. They're going to be right back in that mix. But I do wonder if kind of the contours of how that team wins football games is going to be a lot different next year. The first time, I think that defense is going to be, just awesome. Even losing Lucas Lawler, they still have Tyler Reinhardt in the back, and probably going to need to, solidify some of those corner spots when they get later in the year. But I think that defense is going to be awesome. I just wrote about Jerome LaRue Jr. He just got an Indiana offer, which is a big, so that's 4 offers for that kid as well. And he's their number 3 running back. So I'm really interested to see how they go about defending the state title. I imagine, Jeff Wechter's been coaching for a long time. I don't know if he would be necessarily back, coaching for another few years if he didn't think this team had a legitimate shot to make some noise. So I think they're going to be really, really fun to watch next year.
Yeah, I think they may be a little bit more run-based, but Wechter loves to run the ball. It's just the fact that when you have all those outside guys and a quarterback like Stone Saunders, it's rare. I know that there's a lot of great athletes in PA, and we see guys at quarterback, but it still is rare when you have a 4-year quarterback.
And we're used to it, right? Because we're kind of got accustomed to it with having Alex Irby and Stone Saunders back to back.
Exactly. Yeah, they're 1 year apart. It's been a great run for us, for our end, but it is rare. I mean, even guys you see now, you do see it at smaller schools more than you do, at this 5A and 6A level, because there's just more athletes. Even a guy like Matt Sieg at Fort Cherry, obviously he's going to be a 4-year guy. Didn't come in right away and start. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, there'll be more movement going on for sure in the coming weeks. And obviously, we're not quite to June yet. But
and Harrisburg will be fine too. Obviously, Rick Brown's a great player, but if there's one thing you can count on with Harrisburg, it's that they are going to figure out that defense, and that defense is going to be just hammering you one way or the other. The thing about that, even when Micah Parsons is there, even when Terrell Reynolds is there, even when Deontay Barber was there, they have never been a defense that just relied on one guy to do everything for them. They just always find ways to make life miserable for other offenses and make you earn everything. So I still think that Harrisburg team, the fact they made the state semifinals without Kevin Brown for most of the year, and with that, I think Messiah Mickens is going to have a much bigger year too. It's easy to kind of just sit here right in the spring and be like, oh, the teams that were good last year are going to be good again this year. But I think we're going to once again, the Harrisburg McDevitt game, I hope it doesn't come in week 2 this year. I haven't looked at the schedule, but I hope it's not week 2. I hope we kind of get it a little later in the year when both teams are firing all cylinders, because it'll be a fun one.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get it at the end of the year. Yeah, Rick Brown's a perfect example of what you said about finding guys to do it. I mean, we weren't talking, I don't know if we talked at all in preseason about Rick Brown.
No.
Going into 2024. So,
it's just that culture right there where it's like, there are guys that are just ready to come in and fill holes and do what that team needs.
That's exactly right.
Bone, joint, and muscle injuries, they can happen without warning. That's why UPMC Orthopedic Care provides convenient walk-in access at our injury clinics throughout the region. No appointments are needed, just walk in for expert evaluation and exceptional care by our team of orthopedic specialists. Clinics are located in Carlisle, Lidditz, Harrisburg, and Enola. For directions and hours or to learn more, visit upmc.com/injuryclinic.
All right, Dan, we got a couple of things coming up here shortly. Obviously, first up before the Big 33 game, which is Memorial Day Sunday, which I believe is the 25th start, Chapman Field at Cumberland Valley, East Big 33 game, 59th edition, I believe. No, 69th edition, which is pretty impressive. We've got the East-West games. Small school, large school at Chapman Field coming up Sunday the 19th. Is that right? I don't know. I have my dates all screwed up. But 2 games, noon is small. 18th. Noon is the small school. 5 p.m. is the large school. Had a couple changes, a couple things, but Mid-Penn obviously is going to be pretty well represented in the big school. Small school, of course, we got a couple of our Steel High players involved for the East roster, including Jim Evans, obviously a talented, versatile guy playing wide out.
Jet Fuller playing too, Nazir Fuller.
Nazir Fuller is playing listed as a cornerback, and then we've got Yamir Caesar is also involved as a cornerback too, and sort of athlete position. So small school, we don't have a ton there, but small school always seems to be like the more exciting one.
Yeah,
I don't really know why that is. Maybe they're more gutted to play in that
on their shoulders.
Maybe. Yeah, it could be. But we'll move on to the big school game where we've got, I think it's close to 15.
Yeah.
For Mid-Penn. Anybody in particular, those 15 guys, Dan, that you're looking forward to seeing, obviously, one last time?
Well, the thing I kind of like about these games is a lot of times especially when you're looking at the West large school roster, you have the state college kids like Cooper Brushwood, who, by the way, is having an incredible year in boys lacrosse. He's leading that group. Going to be in, all everything in lacrosse. You got him and Eddie Corkery. But I kind of like, given some kids that are on teams that, don't win a ton of games, that are good players that kind of fall through the cracks a little bit and don't necessarily get that recognition during the regular season. Guys like Stanley Logis, who has just been kind of a hammer for Chambersburg for 4 years, also plays on their basketball team. He's playing for the West School. You also have a couple Altoona kids, a couple Mifflin County kids. You've got Mark Harrington from Altoona, who, plays quarterback, punts, kicks, probably works at the concession stand when he's not doing anything else. You got him on the team. And then guys, that are just kind of the classic overlooked kids like Aaron Angelo, who another kid that just does everything for that football program. I think he's a baseball player too, right?
Yep. Oh, very good baseball player.
Yeah. I'm just really excited because it gives a lot of these kids chances to get that recognition. You got Emil Way. I still don't know where Emil Way is committed. I know he has the Division I offers. I always thought he was he's in the small school game.
I'm glad you brought him up though, Dan, because I forgot about Emil Way in the small school and a couple other guys. Michael Kelly, a defensive end for Camp Hill, is on that west side too for the small school. And we had talked a couple weeks ago about Brexton Heckendorf.
Oh yeah,
from Big Spring at tight end too. He's also on the west roster for the small school. So I'm glad you brought up Emil Way. I didn't want to forget naming those guys too.
Yeah. But then on the East roster, you got Leon Parson, who I just had such a great year this year, filling in for Jared Porter. JJ Torres, one of the best offensive linemen, in the Mid-Penn this year, really emerged this year as a reliable guy for that group. Zach Coleman, another underrated, kind of in line with a lot of those other kids I was talking about who, Central Dauphin had a down year, but he's a good player despite playing on kind of a down team. Darian Brown, Susquehanna Township. There's some guys. Also, Jaden Zandier from Exeter Town. I know he's not a Mid-Penn guy, but that kid ran for like 2,000-something yards this year. Yeah, so he'll be fun to watch in this game as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Coleman and the reason story. He was kind of overshadowed because of the tough season that CD had, but he was a heck of a player. And obviously a guy who's moving on to the next level. I want to see Damaj Jala. I talk a lot about Damaj because it's nice when you see the progression
That's a perfect word for it with him.
Particularly in a position like quarterback, because they're so exposed. And obviously they're the guys who, take all the blame when things go wrong. And yes, they get a lot of credit when things go right. But, Jala had a really sort of rough introduction to the position. And, when you're playing in that Commonwealth division, the deficiencies on the squad, especially up front, get really exposed. And he was sort of a man, walking a tightrope, for a long time. But he kept maturing. He kept getting better. He kept working. And it's just good to see. That's really what high school, when you see these kids emerge in high school, like that's what it's all about at that age. You know what I mean? He had to overcome a lot of adversity to get to that position. So I really feel like he's a guy who is going to take this reward, if you will, and do the most with it.
Yep.
Because that's the kind of kid he is. So I'm really impressed with how he basically went about his business during his career.
He became such a better passer because he was one of those kids that, kind of just he basically did the first read and then ran a lot of times when he started out. And he became a complete, when we drop back and pass, we'll run our full game. I think having Santana Young really helped him kind of. I think a lot of times that helps quarterbacks who are developing is having a guy that, you feel like you can trust on every play. And then it almost helps. He's like, oh, I can just go back to them, if my first read isn't looking or whatever, and then I can just go there. But yeah, I totally agree. He's developed into a really good player. And he's going to pair with another District 3 guy, Donovan Gingrich, at quarterback for Conrad Weiser there. So that East roster is going to be pretty fun.
Yeah. There's and you're looking too, and you did mention the state college guys, but Eddie Corker's another kid who obviously basically balanced his career between wideout and quarterback because they were at some point. I can't think of Owen's last name for state college in years prior, but he went down. Corker stepped in and then became this tremendously sort of accomplished quarterback.
Yeah,
and he's a guy too that, I mean, when he takes off, it's like he almost reminds me of he's huge, and it sounds a little bit like, when we talked about Nick Singleton, when he runs by on the sidelines and it's that freight train kind of thing. Like he reminds me of a running back, a really stout running back when they get loose, and him being the size that he is too. I mean, I think he's going to be tremendous at Millersville.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's going to have an unbelievable career there.
He's listed at 6'2", but I've always felt that he looks bigger on the football field. It might just be the way he runs, though.
Well, I will tell you this. He looks a hell of a lot bigger than 190.
Yeah.
When he's running. I'll tell you that much. But he's a tremendous athlete, and I'm really looking forward to watching him. And we got a couple other guys, too. Gavin Kendrick of Cumberland Valley, who's in the middle of trying to win a Commonwealth baseball title with CV right now.
A lot of these baseball guys are playing in this game.
Yep. And it surprised me too. I mean, now Noah Doy for Camp Hill was originally on that list, and is now not on the final roster for the small school. But again, baseball player. And then Cooper Brushwood is a guy too, just one of those like gamers. Like I feel like he's one of those guys too that you could put anywhere on the offensive side, and he's going to get you yards and make big plays. So that connection with him and Corcoran could be something to watch as well.
That kicker too, William Weck on Central Catholic. That kid's got a leg. I'm kind of surprised he's not in the Big 33. Well, there have been some good kickers coming out of Western PA in recent years, so it's kind of a competition to get that one spot.
And I think Scott Pentel, who was the state college long snapper, is on this roster too. I'm not.
We didn't mention Brady Hockenberry either.
Right. Hockenberry was the last guy I was going to mention. Obviously, tremendous career at West Perry, and just
tough as nails.
Yeah, he really is. Again, I can't. The fullback position's sort of going away in football, but he just reminds me of one of the like Riggins.
Yeah.
He just reminds me of the throwback guy, and you plop him in the middle of defense too. and he makes stops for you. So that'll be fun to watch him too. But yeah, two of those games coming up on the 18th, Sunday the 18th. Small school is noon at Cumberland Valley, and the big school game will be 5 p.m. at Cumberland Valley. And of course, that'll precede a week later, the Big 33. So if you're hankering for some football, it seems like the weather's going to be nice. Get out there for a measly, I don't know what tickets cost, $10, $15 maybe, but it should be a good time. And there's a lot of good players to watch. A lot of these guys are moving on. If they're not moving on for football, they're moving on for other sports like Brushwood, and these guys take advantage of it while you can. And then, of course, we'll have the Big 33 on the 25th. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week. I wanted to bring up a story I just seen. It's a Lehigh Valley story, but I'll give you a little context here. And the reason I like these games is because the Mid-Penn used to put on an all-star game on Thanksgiving Day. Okay. And it was, they would play it at 10 o'clock in the morning. So guys can get back, have Thanksgiving dinner with their families, by 3 or 4. Everybody could kind of settle in, watch the NFL games later. So it was an early game. But what they would do was, and I'm not sure when it started. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 1989, 90, something like that. And it ran for roughly 5 or 6 years. And what you did was at the end of the season, regular season, however many wins your team had, you got one more pick. So, a lot of times, like maybe your senior captains or whatever would get picked for this game, and then they would show up. You'd have a day of practice, and then Thanksgiving Day you would play. And of course, teams that were still involved in state playoffs, you would not participate, because your team's still involved, obviously in states. But, you got to remember, too, the state playoffs, too, are not very long, not very deep. 88 was the first time they played, the state playoffs. So anyway, I liked having that. Even as I got older and started working in the business, obviously the Mid-Penn did not still do that. But a lot of these places around the state have Thanksgiving Day rivalry games, Obviously, the biggest one being, Phillipsburg and Easton, that they play at Lafayette Stadium now. And that's, I don't know what the history of that is. I think it goes back 80, 90 years, maybe more, something like that. But anyway, this story is about Catasauqua and Northampton, the Concrete Kids. So we actually scrimmaged once during my playing days. And the Concrete Kids, they were small, tough kids, and we would beat them, but you hurt. You hurt for a couple days afterwards. That's how tough they were. But anyway, this rivalry game goes back to E25, and apparently there was a push to end it because it's been such a lopsided affair for the past 10 years. Northampton has won 10 straight in the series, has owned this. They were talking about safety issues and this and that. But anyway, they just voted to keep the game, the Thanksgiving Day games. So my question to you is, do you like Thanksgiving games? I don't know if you're familiar with them, if where you grew up, you had them. I'm interested in your thought about having a Thanksgiving Day game. Obviously, not having one in this area makes it easier on us.
Yeah.
But this is something that people in that neck of the woods have looked forward to, and it's just part of Thanksgiving. It's part of the Thanksgiving weekend.
I think my take with it is very similar to like how I feel about a lot of this stuff, which is that I'm always pro traditional things that a community likes and keeping them going. I'm not a big fan of like forcing it, like being like, hey, this is a good chance to make some concessions and let's get an extra day. And, the state playoff stuff, district playoff stuff all complicates it as well. Growing up where I did, I mean, my high school was not a football powerhouse. District 1 kind of also ran,
right?
Wissahickon, yeah.
Wissahickon, yeah.
So high school football wasn't exactly a priority. I think we were always more of, basketball, track, stuff like that. But I think in this type of situation, like I love, that they're voting to, keep it going. And along those lines, I just get both. It's one of those things where it's like, you really get the logic on both sides, right? You get where it's like, hey, if we're going to be playing in a state playoff game, we don't want to have to be committed to this, and we don't want to have to screw other people over. But also, it's something that the thing I do know about these games are that where they happen, they are like the biggest deal. It's just what you do, right? It's like it's not even something you bat an eye at. It's like if you live in New York, you go to Rockefeller Center to skate around the big Christmas tree. I mean, I guess I assume you do. I don't know. Probably now it probably costs like $100 to do that or something. So maybe you don't. It's just anything that becomes sort of like a cultural touchstone for an area. That's why high school football is, beloved still in a lot of these areas where these teams don't have a chance to win state championships 99.99% of the time, right? It's why they still fill the stands. It's just because it matters. And so anything that kind of adds a little bit of garnish to that, I'm all for.
Yeah.
But again, you do have to, I also am saying that with the addendum that if there's any sort of like risk of, like health and safety stuff that they kind of deem not worth it, then I also agree with that, because that's the primary goal here, is making sure these kids get healthy out of the football season.
Well, this was interesting because this was a big community push.
Yeah.
Like this was on the table, and then community members came together, and essentially it was, the majority were Catasauqua people who obviously are getting dented in this series the last 10 years. Catasauqua is 2A. And
you don't want to end the series on a bad note. You want to get your win first.
Well, that's it. Maybe that's the reason. But I'm saying Northampton's a 6A school. Catasauqua was a 2A school. So that was sort of one of the gists of having it. Plus, this thing goes back to 1925. So major history there. And maybe the fact that they played it for 100 years, this and that. But I think you said something about the calendar. And now that the state playoffs are so prevalent, districts run you right up to states and things like that. I think it's almost impossible to add a Thanksgiving Day game.
That's kind of what I'm at. I feel like if it's already established as your touchstone sort of community thing, keep it. But it's going to be really hard to, especially I don't think coaches are going to be super thrilled about the idea if it's like about trying to build it up. Because at the end of the day, football is one of those sports that not all high school sports are like this, but football is a sport where you are kind of judged by, wins and losses do matter to a certain degree. And, it's just going to be a hard sell, I think.
Well, I think too that, kids these days are being pulled in way more directions than they were 30 years ago. I mean, there were sports that we're playing now or PIAA sanctioned that didn't even exist in this area. Lacrosse being one. Field hockey was big, but not this big. Everybody's niece is in gymnastics, which wasn't even talked about. So, all those things too. And the fact that the calendar is really tightened up, the fact that you're right. I think it's, to say, hey, listen, we're going to have to go and give 4 hours on Thanksgiving morning, while you leave everybody else back at home getting things ready. You're not going to cut it either.
Yeah, that's
so I think it's just a hard sell to add anything like that. Because I was thinking, would it be possible, for the Mid-Penn to bring back that sort of agenda?
My other thing is it's almost similar to like my feelings about, I've always talked about this with my friends. People like, it's so cool. Boise State's got the blue field. More teams should do that. I was like, no, more teams shouldn't do it. Because it makes it more special when you kind of have these specific things that specific communities do as their own kind of thing. When everyone's doing it, then it kind of becomes a little less, less of a cultural thing and more of just it becomes more of a fad or something like that. So I kind of like that there are these little sort of quirks in PA high school football, and there's nothing wrong with just some teams doing things differently.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can't remember the team out west who has actually black turf.
Yeah.
But at night games, it looks like they're running on nothing. It's tarmac. And then, of course, Bell Vernon with the gold turf is pretty damn cool as well. I guess Milton Hershey would be considered partially gold.
Yeah. Right? Milton Hershey's like a kind of in this uncanny valley where it just kind of looks like dead grass sometimes. But
the lantern flies.
Yeah.
They love Spartan Stadium. They love it. Yeah. I took out about 22 of them last time I was a Spartan.
You gotta tweet out your counter during the game.
You got to do your part, Dan. You know what I mean? You got to do your part.
I think they're gone now. I actually read that they're going to kind of fade away because it took a couple years for local animals to realize that they were edible. And so it was almost sort of like an evolutionary thing where once kind of, birds and animals figured out that they could eat those things, they have been doing a lot of the killing. But it took like 2 years for them to figure out they could do it.
Well, good for them for figuring that. I thought it was just a 1 year thing.
Yeah. No, they come.
I haven't seen one in a year.
Oh, I've seen them in Linglestown is where I see them a lot.
I thought it was like Haley's Comet, like every 60 years.
We're supposed to get a ton of cicadas this year. I just read that.
Oh, I don't like those things.
No, they're creepy.
They're big, although they're not as big as the palmetto bugs. When I lived in Miami, they literally were flying.
I saw one of those when I visited my family in Florida. We were flying. I remember I was like 8 years old. We were walking off the shuttle of the bus to the airport, and I see one of those giant palmetto bugs, and I think I let out like a giant scream. It's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. They're
like flying, mini like pterodactyls.
Yep.
Yeah, they fly and they nip at you.
Yep.
Anyway. All right, well, listen, that'll do it, I think, for this edition of the PA High School Football Report. Thanks, Dan, for your time, and thank you for listening. We will be back next week. We'll have a little preview of the Big 33 on deck, and we'll bring you other couple of news stories we're working on as well. Get out there and watch some football coming up.
And shout out to us for
oh, yeah, we forgot. Well, listen, this is interesting. Let me give you 30 seconds of this. There have been a few lists that have popped up in recently about our podcast and where we rank in the digital space. One was just for high school football, which I believe we were 6th. And I never heard of the.
I'm still convinced those were AI generated articles.
Probably
take it.
I'll take it. Less than 24 hours later, there was another one that came out that said we were 24th. Then I think we were 11th in Pennsylvania. But we just got a runner-up, a number 2, on apparently something that does exist.
Yeah.
And it's called the Headliners Award, which are legit awards. And Dan, you are number 2 for podcasts.
Dos Equis.
Sports podcast.
I never looked at who was number 1 because I figured, you know what, it's just better. We just keep churning.
It was probably like, Joe Rogan or something like that. It was probably right behind them.
Rogan doesn't do sports, brother.
He does MMA, if that counts.
He's not well, yeah, but I don't know if he podcasts about MMA.
He does. He brings on MMA people, then talks about nothing related to MMA. But
yeah, well, that's he's got a bigger budget than we do anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're apparently number 2. Again, as long as we defeat Black Swamp football, which is my favorite.
You're a weekly listener, right?
That's right. I'm the daily listener. Yeah, I think we're in pretty good shape. But yeah, National Headliners Award, number 2 podcast. We appreciate it. Again, I don't know if that enters us in plaque territory. It might just be certificate territory.
I think it is certificate territory.
Megan would know. We have a hard time getting plaques, Dan. You and I get a lot of certificates.
Well, when we do get plaques, they write that my name is Don. So
That's right.
Yeah.
But yes, this is a legit award. It started in the 1930s. By I think it's the New Jersey Press Club Association. So,
I don't think they've been giving out podcast awards since the 90s.
Now they're giving out podcast awards.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, we will take it. We are very happy to receive it and very thankful. And, it's fun talking about football. If you can't.
Bone, joint, and muscle injuries, they can happen without warning. That's why UPMC Orthopedic Care provides convenient walk-in access at our injury clinics throughout the region. No appointments are needed, just walk in for expert evaluation and exceptional care by our team of orthopedic specialists. Clinics are located in Carlisle, Lidditz, Harrisburg, and Enola. For directions and hours or to learn more, visit upmc.com/injuryclinic.
Have fun talking about high school football. You shouldn't be doing a podcast anyway. So we enjoy it. Thank you to the readers, of course. And any last words, Megan or Dan?
Nope.
Nope. All right. We'll see you guys next week.